So the real estate industry is changing. AI is coming, and we're going to have to compete with these guys. And we're not going to be able to do that with flawed technology. And yes, Matrix is flawed. In fact, it's deeply flawed right at the core. And the thing about this is that nobody knows about these flaws. They're hidden, and that's why they're not getting dealt with. So that's the purpose of this video. So let's start with this. What do we actually use Matrix for? Well, when you think about it, everything we do with Matrix involves doing some kind of a search, whether we're looking for properties for buyers, doing a CMA for sellers, or looking at market stats. Market stats require a search going on in the background. Everything involves doing some kind of a search, and the problem is searches are not working the way they should. Okay, search results are coming up short, and listings are getting lost and falling through the cracks. But we don't realize this. We use the tool, we do a search, we think we're seeing all the results, and we're not. And that's a big problem. In fact, these are very serious problems, and they're having an effect on our professionalism, and it's not a good one. Okay, buyers are not being properly served, sellers are not being properly served, and our market stats are getting skewed. And all of this is because searches are not working. So now the question is, why? So when I ask around, when I talk to other agents or Pillar 9 people about what's going on here, why aren't searches returning all the results, the answer that I always get is user error, that agents are screwing up and putting the data in wrong, and that's what's causing the problem. And yes, that is a thing. However, there's something else going on here, something much deeper and more fundamental. That's the hidden flaw that I'm talking about. So what is it? It's the fact that the database is not structured properly. In fact, it's a mess. So what am I talking about? Let's take a closer look. So our MLS data is structured as a hierarchical database, which is basically a giant tree structure or a tree diagram. Okay, now to illustrate the problem and show you what I'm talking about here, I'm going to create a little database out of food, a little tree diagram out of food. So we're going to branch off of here. We're going to create a subcategory, a field, okay, and then we're going to branch off of one of those, create another field, branch off of one of those, create another field. This is a giant hierarchical tree structure, and if you want to find something within it, you simply specify the path through the tree, and that works. However, there are some ways to screw this up and make it dysfunctional. In fact, there are 4 ways, and I want to show you this because all 4 of these things are happening in our database. So method number 1 to screw it up is we're going to take one of these items and we're going to duplicate it. Okay, we're going to have it in 2 separate places within the tree. This does not work. This makes it very dysfunctional. Method number 2, we're going to take one of these items and we're going to just move it into the wrong field. Also dysfunctional. Method number 3, we're going to take one of these items that we should have here and just delete it. Okay, we need it there. It's supposed to be there, but it's gone. That's dysfunctional. And method number 4, we're going to take 2 of these items and squash them together and create one item out of them, kind of meld them together. Now that doesn't work because if you want to find one of those things, you can't isolate them, you get all or nothing. So that's also dysfunctional. All 4 of these things are happening within our database. Now let's look at a specific example. Okay, we're going to zoom in on this first method and how this relates to secondary suites. So if a house has a secondary suite, we need to be able to specify that in the tree, but only in one place, not in 2. And that's the problem. So let's take a look at that. If we're going to do a search in Calgary going back a year, residential detached, looking for suites, we go down to this additional fields where there's an add and remove thing and you put in a suite field here. If we check that, go to illegal, both legal and illegal suites, we're going to get 2704 matches. But where's the other spot? Where is that? Well, I'll show you. It's here under the basement field. Okay, there's a suite under here. If we click that, we're going to get 1972 matches, which of course is different than the other number of 2704. Starting to notice a problem here? Okay, so let's do the obvious thing and let's check both. Instead of just one or the other, we'll check both. And if we do that, we get 1920 matches, which is actually less than either of those other ones. Now, just a quick side note here. I don't want you to get distracted by something. I know what you might be thinking is that why are these numbers different? Because the basement field is only for basement suites, and the other field is for all the suites, which would include backyard and carriage suites, etc. That's why there's more of them. That is not what's happening here. So please don't be distracted by that. What is happening, let me show you. So when you're listing a house with a secondary suite, there's actually 3 different ways to do it. There's 2 fields to use, but that gives you 3 different options. The first one is to use only the suite field, and as you can see, there's 784 houses that were listed where the listing agent decided to check only the suite field. Another way to do it is to use the basement field and put the suite under there, and there's 52 houses that were listed where the agent used that field only. And the third option is to check both of the fields, and there's 1,920 that were done that way. So there's 3 different ways to list a property. And as you can see by these numbers, it's kind of a confusing mess. So you may be wondering, well, how many actually are there in total? And the answer is 2756. That's how many houses are listed with a suite. But can we find them? Can we do a search that's going to find all of them? Well, the answer is no, it's not possible. But let's go through the exercise anyways, and you can see why. So doing a search, we've got 3 different options. The first option is to check only the suite field, and that's going to capture both of these groups here, and that's going to give us a total of 2704. And sure enough, that's what we got when we did it before. The problem is when you do it this way, these ones over here are getting lost and falling through the cracks. They're not going to show up in the search. So let's look at another way. We're going to use the basement field, and when we do that, we're going to capture both of these groups here, and that's going to give us a total of 1972. And sure enough, that's what we get. But of course, when we do it this way, now these ones are getting lost and falling through the cracks. They're not going to show up on our search. So let's look at the third option where we check both of these fields, and in that case, we're going to capture only this group here in the middle, and of course that's 1920, and that's what we get here, 1920. And when we do this, of course, both of these groups here are now getting lost and falling through the cracks. So now hopefully you can see what I mean when I say that this is a dysfunctional mess. Now, just on a side note, I actually showed this to one of the Pillar 9 people. I demonstrated this to him, and he didn't seem to think it was a big deal. I said, well, how do I do a search to find them all? He goes, well, just use the search option that's going to give you the most results. He thought that was good enough. So let's do that. Let's look at the best case scenario. That would be this one here. Okay, if we just check the suite field only, we're going to get the most results. That's 2704. That's our best case scenario. The problem with that, of course, is that these ones are not going to show up. They're going to get lost and fall through the cracks. Now that's a really big problem for both buyers and sellers. Buyers can't find the properties. They're wanting to do a thorough and complete search and look for all of the properties that have a basement suite, and they're missing a whole bunch of them. Sellers, for these sellers here, these 52, it's even worse because they're not getting the full market exposure that they deserve. Now that is a very real and measurable effect. Let's take a look at that. Let's do a comparison between these two groups. Okay, we'll call this the best option, and we'll call this the falling through the cracks option. And let's look at how these two groups of properties perform in the market over the last 3 years. So here's the days on market. And as you can see, the falling through the cracks ones, those 52 listings, they're taking substantially longer to sell, and they're selling for less money. That's the sales to list price ratio. So they're taking longer to sell and selling for less money. That's a big deal. That is the hidden flaw that I'm talking about. Search results are coming up short, listings are getting lost and falling through the cracks. Our buyers and sellers are not being served properly. This is not good for our professionalism, both as individuals and as an industry. And it's happening because the basic rules of how to organize a database are being violated. Now let me be clear. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is one example. This exact same thing is happening in many, many places throughout our whole database, and it's causing the same problem. This has to be dealt with.